Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out this random piece of grass changed the world forever.
This may seem like an ordinary piece of grass, but 250 years ago, this was the location of one of the most revolutionary events in human history, and everybody should know about it. Really quick, this is only my third ever video. I'm trying to raise interest in British heritage, showing off stories just like this one that more people should know. I posted...
Y'all be sure to go to Britmapped and like and subscribe. Hidden Britain.
Interest in British heritage, showing off stories just like this one that more people should know. I posted this video on my social media only a couple days ago, and it's got hundreds of thousands, nearly millions of views now, so I thought it's only right that I made a longer form video of this so you can entirely see the full story. This grass circle is called the Eye of York. Obviously it's in the English city of York, and it sits next to Clifford's Tower, which was built by William the Conqueror in 1068. The tower's most famously known for the brutal...
Oh wait, 1068, that's 2 years after the Battle of Hastings, I know that. He said William the Conqueror, who was a Norman king who came from Normandy and conquered Britain, right? Pretty sure? He was about to say something interesting on me.
By William the Conqueror in 1068. The tower's most famously known for the brutal pogrom in 1190, where the entire Jewish community in York ended their own lives instead of handing themselves over to an anti-Semitic mob that were chasing them down. It was happening all over the country, but the worst one was here. But it was 600 years...
Wow. 1100 something, the whole Jewish community of the area went in there and burned themselves to death? What now? Show me on a map. The Eye of York. Oh, there it is. Yes. Between a couple rivers, looks like. York, it's like right in the middle of York almost. Okay, yes. Yes, got it. And let me find this tower next to it. Clifford's Tower. That is beautiful. I can tell it's very old and a ruin, but it just looks very well kept. The mound is nice. Oh, they've added railings. I wonder what the steps were like before. Oh, that's inside of it. Look at that, y'all. Wow. There's some holes in the wall where they would have wooden beams, and then on top of those beams they would put a floor. I think that's amazing. Oh, they've done something to it. Oh, wow. They made a roof on, I guess that's part of it. Wow. Oh, I would love to go there. Oh, look at the video. Wow. Something that I think is really beautiful about it too is that it's there all alone. There's so much space around it where there's no modern buildings. It's easy to visualize what it would have looked like a long time ago. Oh, look at that. Okay, so it used to have a moat, and then there was a walled city. Amazing. Let's look at that map again. Oh my. Okay, wow. So the city was right here. The Eye of York. I don't want to read anything about the Eye of York yet, because I don't want to spoil the video. It was originally built on orders of William I to dominate the former Viking city of Jorvik. The first moat and bailey castle on the side was built in 1068. In 1190, 150 local Jews were immorted in a pogrom in the timber castle keep. Most of them committed S-word in order not to fall into the hands of the mob. York Massacre. What's a pogrom? A violent riot incited with the aim of offing or expelling an ethnic or religion. Like, what led up to that? You know, that's the story I'm hoping to... Oh, here we go. English heritage. The massacre at Clifford's Tower. Decline all. After the Norman conquest of 1066, a number of Jews came to England from Rouen, France. The early Norman kings needed to borrow money to build castles and secure their kingdom, but money lending was forbidden to Christians. It was, however, permitted to Jews. These French-speaking Jews were protected by the crown, and in time established communities in most of the principal cities of England. In later 12th century, members of the Jewish community in Lincoln settled in York. However, there was a growing hostility towards the Jewish population in England. This was in part due to public disagreements in theology between Jewish scholars and Christian churchmen. In the mid-12th century, several vicious stories were spread accusing Jews of murdering Christian children. Such slanders, now known as blood libel, strengthened anti-Semitic sentiment in England. The coronation of Richard I. Resentment about the presence of Jews at the coronation was fueled by anger about taxes to fund the Crusades, leading to riots at the ceremony itself and in Norwich, Stamford, York, and Lincoln. A false rumor was even put about that the king had ordered a massacre of the Jews. Benedict was attacked and killed on his way back to York. The sheriff of York left for the Third Crusade. A fire broke out in the city. This was during a time of increasing attacks on Jews throughout England, and some citizens took advantage of the chaos to break into Benedict's house in Coney Street. The property was looted and everyone inside killed. Oh my God. Trapped in the tower, inside the tower, trust between the Jews and the keeper broke down, and when he left the tower on other business, they refused to allow him back in. They had now challenged the king's authority, and troops joined the mob outside, where they were pelted with stones from the castle walls by the besieged Jews. Friday, 16th March, coincided with Shabbat HaGadol. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. The Great Sabbath before the Jewish festival of Passover. According to several accounts, the Jews realized that they could not hold out against the attackers, and rather than waiting to be killed or forcibly baptized, decided to meet death together. The father of each family killed his wife and children before taking his own life. Wow. Just before their deaths, they also set fire to the possessions they had brought with them. This fire consumed the timber tower. It is not clear how many Jews were present. Estimated range from 20 to 40 families, and a later account in Hebrew suggests about 150. Wow. My gosh. I can't even imagine. I don't even want to imagine. Wow.
Chasing them down. It was happening all over the country, but the worst one was here. But it was 600 years later, 600 years after that brutal event, that something happened here that would change the course of history forever, not just in Britain, but across
something
the entire
more
globe.
substantial than
it was
that.
on March 25th, 1784, which was a damp, cold, rainy, windy, horrible afternoon in York.
5 years before the French Revolution.
But despite this, 4,000 keen locals, Yorkshire locals, had shown up here to listen to a man. Now, this was no normal man. This was a 24-year-old Yorkshire man from a wealthy yet common family in Hull. So they weren't part of the nobility, they were non-titled, so they were common, but they were wealthy. This boy was actually a very sickly child, and he'd lost his father at the age of 9, having to grow up with evangelical relatives, so he'd had a tough life, who stood just 5'3" tall, barely even...
Yo, this haircut isn't doing him any favors. 5'3", dang.
He'd had a tough life, who stood just 5'3" tall, barely even above the speaking podium that he stood behind. The weather was so bad that a member of the audience actually expressed genuine concern that the little speaker may blow away in the harsh winds. But this man spoke, and he spoke for an hour, in a voice more powerful even than the weather, with audience members frozen in time by the man's oratory ability. One spectator exclaimed, "We are unable to do it justice in any account we can give of it." But he made the most argumentative and eloquent speech, which was listened to with the most eager attention and received with the loudest exclamations of applause. This patch of grass was actually the centre of politics for the entirety of the county of Yorkshire. Now Yorkshire is North Yorkshire, North East, South West, but at one point it was all joined together, and it was the whole county of Yorkshire, which was the largest constituency in all of England at the time. And it was ruled by 2 MPs, and these MPs historically had only ever been titled members, so members of the nobility, and they were known as Knights of the Shire for the county. So they were what we would class as the MPs. There'd be 2 of them for the whole of Yorkshire, and they'd usually come from a titled family, members of the nobility. Just in case you're not aware, an MP is a member of Parliament. What they do is they represent their constituents, so in Yorkshire, and they hold the government and executive accountable in the House of Parliament. And the American equivalent, it would be a congressman or a congresswoman. That is what an MP is, or a member of Parliament. But this common young man, 24-year-old, gave such a gigantic performance that he was subsequently voted in as MP for Yorkshire in 1784.
I gotta read this speech.
This would be a momentous yet overlooked moment in human history, because fast forward 23 years to the exact same day, on the 25th of March 1807, that same small man sat in Parliament with tears streaming down his cheeks as he received tributes from his peers all around him, because for the first time, due to this Yorkshire man, who, by the way, he was not from a noble family or a titled family, as I've said, but he did grow up around wealth and privilege. He was the son of a merchant, but he had chosen to dedicate every second of his life to a most noble cause. This man's relentless 2 decades of parliamentary campaigning had resulted in the trading of enslaved people to be banned across the British Empire for the very first time. But this was not nearly enough for this determined man and his peers.
Okay. Wait, has he mentioned his name yet? I gotta read this speech.
The Abolition of the Slave Trade Act, which was in 1807, did exactly what it said in the name. The transatlantic slave trade had now officially ended for Britain, and the West Africa Squadron was created to enforce this, which they did at great cost, as you probably know. But it did not end slavery itself. It just banned the transportation of slaves.
Oh, it banned the transportation. Well, that's a step, right? That's a step
Though
forward.
slavery still carried on itself in the colonies, as there was nothing in this new law which said that plantation owners could not use their enslaved labour force. So hundreds of thousands of people still remained enslaved, and much more work was to be done. After 26 more years of relentless fighting with him and his close peers, and by the way, one of his close peers was William Pitt the Younger, who he had been friends with his entire life from when they were children. William Pitt the Younger was Prime Minister for a lot of this time, but after 26 more years of relentless fighting, the small man that made all this impact now lay on his deathbed, suffering from severe influenza at the age of 73. 50 years after he had made that speech here in York, on his deathbed, he was informed that the practice of slavery entirely was to be officially abolished across the British Empire, with the government actually paying tribute to this man's efforts. This was the start of the emancipation of enslaved peoples across the entirety of the planet, and the reason so many millions of people enjoy their freedom to this day. His life's noble work,
what's his name? Damn it.
Was complete, and he passed away 3 short days later. 1 month later, in August of 1833, the Slavery Abolition Act was passed in this man's honour, specifically in this man's honour. Some people do argue against the immediate impact of the act, but it most certainly set in motion a great changing of our times. The magnitude of this moment can be seen by the fact that both Houses of Parliament were subsequently suspended, and the government pleaded with his family that he be buried in Westminster Abbey next to William Pitt the Younger, even though he requested to be buried at his local church with his sister and his mother. He was then interred in Westminster Abbey. This absolute giant of a man was William Wilberforce. In 2000...
William Wilberforce, that's a name, y'all. That's the kind of name that an athlete would have. There he is. There's that nose. I recognize that nose. British politician, philanthropist, and leader of the movement to abolish the Atlantic slave trade. Wilberforce was convinced of the importance of religion, morality, and education.
Speech by William Wilberforce. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Speech given to the House of Commons on the 12th of May 1789 by William Wilberforce. When I consider the magnitude of the subject which I am to bring before the House, a subject in which the interests not of this country, nor of Europe alone, but of the whole world and of posterity are involved. And when I think at the same time on the weakness of the advocate who has undertaken this great cause, when these reflections press upon my mind, it is impossible for me not to feel both terrified and concerned at my own inadequacy to such a task. But when I reflect, however, on the encouragement which I have had through the whole course of a long and laborious examination of this question, and how much candour I have experienced, and how conviction has increased within my own mind, in proportion as I have advanced in my labours, when I reflect especially that however averse any gentleman may now be, yet we shall all be of one opinion in the end, when I turn myself to these thoughts, I take courage, I determine to forget all my other fears, and I march forward with a firmer step in the full assurance that my cause will bear me out, and that I shall be able to justify upon the clearest principles every resolution in my hand, the avowed end of which is the total abolition of the slave trade.
That's very interesting. He's setting the stage really well. He's helping the listener put themselves into it. He's not just saying, no more slavery, no more slavery. He's saying, when I think about this, I appeal to my good nature and I think about the context that we're in and the world. Very interesting.
I wish exceedingly in the outset to guard both myself and the House from entering into the subject with any sort of passion. It is not their passions I shall appeal to. I ask only for their cool and impartial reason, and I wish not to take them by surprise, but to deliberate, point by point, upon every part of this question.
That's interesting, too. I've heard that, we're very politically divided in the States. Maybe you've heard, I think, in the UK as well. But whenever you point fingers at the other side and say, you're this, it doesn't persuade people at all. But he's trying to put all the passion, the high tempers aside, and just make the case point by point. Cool heads. That's really smart. Really smart.
I mean not to accuse anyone, but to take the shame upon myself, in common indeed with the whole Parliament of Great Britain, for having suffered this horrid trade to be carried on under their authority. We are all guilty. We ought all to plead guilty, and not to exculpate ourselves by throwing the blame on others.
This is going to be pretty long. So he's painting a picture of what a horrible experience it is to ride in these ships across the Atlantic.
1/3 more die in the seasoning, and this in a country exactly like their own, where they are healthy and happy as some of the evidences would pretend.
Very interesting. Back to our original video, though.
This absolute giant of a man was William Wilberforce. In 2007, on the 200th anniversary of Parliament's anti-slave trade legislation, which I talked about earlier, the film Amazing Grace, which was about William Wilberforce, was released, and it's one of the most popular films of all time, and you may also know the song. Also, Wilberforce's birthplace in Hull was bought by the city in 1903, and it was opened as Wilberforce House, and it was the first ever slavery museum in Britain. And the Wilberforce University in Ohio, in the US, is named after him, and it was the first owned by African American people, and it's a historically black college.
Wow. Show me on a map. There it is. Wilberforce University. There it is. Wow. Very cool. Okay.
Owned by African American people, and it's a historically black college. When I posted a short about this on social media, a lot of people from the States actually spoke about this, which was really, really cool. Another really cool fact is that in 1829, 3 African Americans, some families from Cincinnati in Ohio in the United States, seeking freedom from oppressive racial discrimination in the United States, they purchased land in Ontario in Canada, in the Biddulph township, and by 1832 the colony had about 32 families, schools, churches, and a healthy working environment. It didn't end up working out, and a lot of them had left after 20 years or so. However, this attempt is remembered in history, and they named it themselves the Wilberforce Colony.
Wow, that's quite a dedication, I have to say. In 1829, a group of free blacks from Cincinnati, Ohio set out for Biddulph Township in Upper Canada with a bold vision to establish an organized colony where they could enjoy freedom, self-determination, and equality. They were joined by African Americans from New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, and other places. Settlers purchased 323 hectares, 800 acres, of land from the Canada Company, aided by a group of Ohio Quakers, and named it after the British abolitionist William Wilberforce. I said it wrong. William Wilberforce. It's kind of a tongue-twister name. By 1832, there were 32 families, a sawmill, and 2 schools, Baptist and Methodist congregations, a temperance society, a blacksmith, shoemaker, and tailor. Because of the number of settlers was much smaller than they originally planned, and due to the unwillingness of Canada Company agents to sell them more land, the colony did not expand. Many of its leaders left by the 1840s. Wow!
But in history, and they named it themselves the Wilberforce Colony, after our great man from Yorkshire.
Wow. Y'all be sure to go to Britmapped and like and subscribe. Let me make sure I liked this video. I'm subscribed. Let me give it a like. Great. I definitely knew that the Brits were the first to abolish slavery, but I didn't know who was behind it, And I think that's so cool that he got so much recognition. Wow, it all started right there. A lot of stuff happened right there, huh? Look at that. There's a parking lot. It's kind of funny. Kind of funny that such a substantial part of the area is a parking lot. But, I mean, you gotta park your car, right? York Castle Museum. Oh, there's like a town recreation inside this big building. Wow. Oh, wow. Amazing. That reminds me of Disney World. Or Las Vegas. Well, y'all. The Eye of York. Well, this was fascinating. Be sure to go to Britmapped and like and subscribe. I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank y'all for watching this with me. And I'll see y'all next time. Later.